creative about photography, Miguel?
It kind of depends, I think, on who you ask. I don't think all photographers will tell you that it's a creative thing.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, because there's people who like setting up their photo shoots and making like creative decisions that they have control over. Whereas there's others who might just do it for work, and their work is really, really great, but they don't think of it as a creative outlet, more so just work.
And where do you fall under all of those things or categories you just list?
I think I started approaching it as a creative thing, but then as I kept doing it, eventually I ended up going into just thinking it more as a practice.
Okay.
Yeah.
For what purpose? Because you don't do it as a job, at least not a primary job. So it's no longer creative to you, but you're doing it, so you're still getting something out of it. Still satisfying, I guess. Like,
yeah. I think there's still a certain satisfaction of having maybe made something out of nothing.
sure.
But yeah, I don't. The way that I typically shoot doesn't involve like managing, controlling anything. As I'm shooting, I kind of just document what's going on. If anything, maybe my creative decisions might come out after shooting, when I'm picking out what work I consider good.
I feel like he's really narrowing the definition. Like, because he still sounds like he's doing stuff. Like, you're still making something. You're making a creative decision as far as you're pointing, you're shooting, you're interpreting a scene and picking, you're composing out of everything a shot. Like, how is that not creative?
Well, I think depending on your approach, like for me, I've arrived at a point where when I'm shooting, I'm not thinking about it. So even with like compositions, with colors or anything, I've gotten to a point where I'm shooting more so out of like instinct, or recognizing when something is like really appealing to me,
Right.
and then not questioning it and shooting it automatically.
Okay.
The compositions, I think at first, when you're first starting out, do involve a little bit of thinking, but over time it becomes a little bit more of a muscle memory. So yeah, when I'm shooting, I'm not really, I don't think, making creative decisions. I think if I were to approach it that way, I would question myself a lot of times while I'm shooting and miss a shot.
That's interesting, because I feel like I could apply that with music too, and muscle memory. Like I could sometimes just play and not shut my mind off, and I'm not necessarily, in my mind, being creative, because I'm just playing what I know already.
You're just doing your thing.
I'm just doing my thing, and then I lose. It feels like it feels like you're shutting that part off of your brain almost now, and just doing what you see, because you've done it for so long now.
Yeah, I think that's where you want to get to. You want to be at a proficient enough level where like now you have a strong foundation, and then you can build on top of that.
But is that really not being creative to you, though? Because I feel like it's still creative.
I think there's creative aspects to it.
Yeah.
But maybe it was more of a mindset shift. Like, I think in the beginning, when I was approaching it as a creative thing, I would give myself too many excuses to not do the work. Like, I would like wait for inspiration, or few elements just weren't clicking right, so it wasn't like good enough. And I think it was kind of like opening up room for just chasing perfection, whereas where I steered away from thinking about it creatively and just thinking about it as just like there's something I have to do over and over and get good at it. I think that just helped me get better at it and enjoy it a little bit more, not stress too much about it.
It seems like, to hear you describe it, creativity and discipline are almost like close to mutually exclusive. Like you felt like the creative process, is that how you see it? Like instead of viewing it creatively, you had to add discipline to your process and structure, but you feel like you lost creativity from that.
Yeah, I think I think how to describe it, like, what do you call is it Venn
Yeah.
diagrams? Yeah. So like you have discipline, you have creativity, and sometimes there's like a nice little middle area
But do
where
you
the
view
two.
creativity as a roadblock to being disciplined?
For me,
Right.
For
for
you.
me, the way that I
Okay.
work,
Interesting.
because I have one of those minds that's just like racing all the time, and if I don't provide a specific like set of guidelines or a certain structure
Right.
to when I'm doing something, then I don't get anything done.
Okay, so now we're start. Now I'm beginning to be able to relate to you because I was now that starting to make sense. You're just trying to focus, and but create. So what was it like when you were more creative with it? I'm trying to understand like how that might have been a roadblock to your being focused. How were you when you were creative with it? Like how was it different?
When I was trying to be creative with it, sometimes I would narrow down what I would try to shoot. So if I went out, I was so much more like chasing a specific moment.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that was the main driver of my photography in the beginning. Just like I have to wait for just the right moment to arrive, and then I'll shoot it.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Whereas now it's like I focus much more on light, composition, and moment as three different things. Sometimes you get one of them, sometimes you get two, sometimes you get all, sometimes you don't get any. But if I was focused just on like, oh, I need to get this moment and it's got to come out great and perfect, then that moment might never come.
Uh,
So I think being creative that way, like going into it with intention during the shooting process,
Right.
was very limiting to me. But so I think I more so shifted the creative thinking post shooting. Yeah, when I'm picking out what work I thought was good.
but is it still like if you do get that moment, it feels good?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So it
100%.
kind of brings that. That's something you still want, but you just try not to think about it.
Yeah. So ideally, where I want to find myself while I'm shooting, a lot of street photographers call it the zone, which I'm guessing with any other creative
Yeah, it's a
outlet,
zone.
you can always reach a zone.
Mm-hmm.
So when out shooting, usually I would hit the zone if I've been out for a few minutes, if I'm like, I don't know, 10, 20 shots in, and now I'm like going at like a higher speed. I'm not focusing on anything. I'm just like honed in on the picture, and it's like maybe 1 or 2 hours could pass, and I never even noticed it because I was in the zone. But the zone, I think, is much harder to hit when you're thinking of a specific picture you want to take. Whereas if I'm forcing myself to just be out there, walk around, and shoot, I think like volume and rhythm work their way into the zone.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. But when you well, do you ever sit down to try to create something specific, or do you
Uh,
jam until something comes?
that's a good yes and no. Sometimes a lot of times I jam and then something comes, and then I'm like, oh, I found this little sweet little melody or lick.
Right.
I'm going now. I'm going to develop that and keep playing on that one time.
Right. So that's iterative.
Yeah, because I was jamming. A lot of my music comes from jamming. And then from there, I think about if I want to add words, I'll think about lyrics later. But usually the music part comes to me.
So Jake has a very iterative process where it builds on itself, and he kind of almost lets it lead you.
Yeah, I let it evolve.
So you start to get in the zone. You're taking pictures. You're going for volume. You're kind of just capturing. Does that, and then what does that build towards? So you're capturing a lot of shots instead of trying to form one perfect shot or chase something particular. You're in the moment, and then how does that age your process? Does it make you better in some way? Like, what's the product of doing it that way?
Well, it's the way that Jake was describing it. It was really hitting for me. Like
Oh, yeah?
it's pretty identical. I think when I'm out there just walking, like starting the photo walk, it's kind of like jamming. You're like kind of doing something, but you're more so like forcing yourself to do it, not losing your practice. But it's a lot of times you're taking the same pictures that you did before, but you're just like getting started, and you're building up towards something that's kind of like a high. And so when you get there, it's kind of just a way to turn off your mind a little bit, and then maybe like turn up the emotion a little bit more. So for me, when I'm in the zone, and what I try to be good at and not lose my practice with is just to heighten my senses. So when I'm in the zone, all my senses are heightened and I'm not thinking about anything. And ideally, especially with pictures, if all your senses are heightened, then you're taking something that you're reacting to at a very, very raw level. And so those pictures wind up being more so a representation of who you are as a whatever medium you're practicing. And then your work looks less like other people's and more like your own. I think that's kind of what I'm chasing.
That's very interesting. And I'm also trying to think just like the takeaways from this. I hope everyone, like, one thing I'm taking away is like, and we've said before, like, you got to create. It is iterative process. It does build. You can start at any point, but as you continue to do it, that's when you get in the zone. That's when things can happen. But you have to start and just do. And some people are really planners and really, or like the writers who just write and write, but they don't film. They don't start making the music. It's or it's all in their head. At some point, you got to just do. And it doesn't have to be perfect. But I think we all are seeing that, like, you get in the zone and then that's when cool stuff happens. And you got to follow it as well. So you can't be too tied to any specific vision as well, as what I'm hearing, because it became a distraction to you. And so when you're in the zone, you have to be flexible enough to follow, no matter what you thought was going to happen. If you hear a melody or something, or you see something in particular, then you got to chase that instead of having like, So I think that's really interesting. I can relate to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you approach it from that perspective, one way or another, you're getting better because you're doing it more times. And then it'll just be a matter of you'll be better prepared for when something really great is there. Then you'll be able to actually grasp it and make something out of it. Whereas if you took the waiting and see approach for things to align the way you want them to, you might recognize it but not be ready to take advantage of it. Whereas if you force yourself to do the work beforehand, you will be ready for it.